Hello Year 11, I'm going to speak to you a bit about what to do on Literature Paper 1 for AQA and how best to prepare, and also some top tips for the exam, and just some reminders for all of us so that we feel really prepared going into that exam on Monday for our two texts that we're looking at, Macbeth and A Christmas Carol. I'm going to walk you through some things that I think that we should make sure that we're remembering. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about misconceptions, introductions. Hopefully we will feel quite confident in constructing a paragraph now, but I'm just going to go through that with you and just make sure that we all feel really confident going into that exam. All your teachers want you to do well, you want to do well for yourselves, and the exam board wants you to do well as well, so they are looking to credit you positively. So I think going in with that positive mindset is going to be really important for your Paper 1 English exam on Monday. Okay. So I'm going to talk to you about Paper 1 from my perspective as someone that often marks the exam board, and talk to you about what they are looking for. Okay. So in terms of tips for this exam, we are doing Macbeth and A Christmas Carol, so reminder of those two texts. You're not doing texts that you've studied years ago. I know it seems really silly, but there will be people who look at Romeo and Juliet and think, oh, I've done that before. You need to make sure that this is the correct text, and there are always people who make those silly mistakes, so make sure you are reading the questions and what it's asking you for. Okay. The exam board is looking for your knowledge of these texts, and they're looking for your wide knowledge of the text. Okay, they are not looking for a little bit of the extract. They are not looking for one part of the play or one part of the novella. They know you've been studying this for a few years, so wide knowledge of the text, and make sure you are showing that off. They are looking for you to answer the question, okay? And in order to show that you're doing that, in every paragraph, you need to be including that key word from the question. Now, it might be that you are going for a 6+, and hopefully almost all of us are. And if we are looking for a 6+ in our English literature, then we are looking to use synonyms for that key word. Alright, so it's the key word or it's a synonym. But as an examiner, I need to see in every paragraph that you are focused on the question and that you can provide synonyms and examples of them, so similar words. They are looking for you to include AO1, AO2, and AO3, okay, from Macbeth and A Christmas Carol. Both of them are worth 30 marks, and then we know from Macbeth we've got that small spelling marking as well of 4 marks, okay. If you think of this like a sandwich, I'm going to do a very awful drawing of the sandwich now, so apologies in advance. So we've got AO1, top of the bread, AO2 in the middle, and then we've got AO3, bottom bread, okay. If you are making a sandwich and you miss the middle, you miss the ham or the cheese or whatever you're having, you miss the AO2, then that is just 2 pieces of bread and it's not doing much. And that's exactly the same as it is for the exam. If you miss out on one of those AOs, those key ingredients, then you cannot be successful on this exam. The examiner is looking for all of them. So to get above about 10 marks out of 30 on each piece, you need to make sure you are including that AO2. And just a reminder that that AO2 is language analysis. Okay, some of you will look at it as language, some of you will have used the word method, some of you will struggle a bit to identify methods and language, but you will do a really good job on zooming in at words, and you will do a good job of things like connotations, okay, and you need to put whatever you're using in quote marks. Alright, so you're providing that language analysis, that method. It might be one word, it might be 4. We're trying to keep our quotes quite short when we're zooming in, but we need to make sure we're doing that in order to get the marks. If you miss one of these, you're missing a key part of the question. Alright, you've misinterpreted it. It's a bit like if you're just doing AO1, you're making points and quotes, but you've got no language analysis and you've got no context, themes and ideas. It's a bit like doing an addition question in maths when it's asking you for a subtraction. You're not doing the right thing, okay, for the mark scheme. So this is your points and your quotes, or your references to the text. This is our context, our themes, and our ideas. Okay, but all of these kind of interlap with each other, but if you don't have one of them, the interleave, then it's not going to be a successful response. So just remembering that is what the examiner is looking for. Alright? Now, Macbeth is the first thing that they read. So your first paragraph of Macbeth is really, really important. So your introductory line, your intro for Macbeth, is the examiner's first impression of you. Are you a candidate that can write well? Are you someone that's confident? And we're trying to keep our handwriting clear, and it doesn't need to be perfect. As you can see, my handwriting is far from perfect, but it needs to be readable. If it's not readable, then it gets flagged to another examiner as one that we can't read and we can't access, and therefore the marks will go down. Obviously, the examiner is always trying to read it, but if your work is really clunky, if it's really hard to read, if it's too slanted, they're going to really struggle. Remember, these exams are scanned in as well. Okay, right, so we are linking to the question all the time. In our intros are going to be slightly different. So I'm going to go through what a 4, in fact, let me use a different colour pen. We'll use a blue pen for this. What a 4 or a 5, because we're all aiming for at least a 4 or a 5 intro looks like. And then I'm going to go through what a 6+ looks like. So if we think of it like an equation, for an introduction, you need to have the key word in the question plus a point. Okay, if you're doing an intro, some of you might think, actually, I'm just going to go straight into my paragraph, I'll mention my point there because an introduction confuses me, and that's fine. But if you can have an introduction that's nice and clear, it tells the examiner what you're going to write about, it sets you up really well. So we might have a question on Beth and the supernatural, for example. So we might say something like, Shakespeare, and make sure we've got that spelling right because we've been writing it for years, presents the supernatural to be controlling the characters in the play. Okay, something like that. So that might be your intro. Some of you might have been taught to do it longer, taught to do it in a different way. That's fine. Go with whatever way is working for you, as long as you've got that keyword there and it's really clear what you're talking about in the play. Okay, so I've got my keyword, which is supernatural, and I've got my point about being controlling. Okay, so I've done what I need to do. Now, if we are going for a 6+, we need to have keyword or a synonym for the keyword, as long as we're telling the examiner what we're going to write about, plus a line of argument. Okay, and for those of you going for an 8+, so those 8s and 9s, you need to have a line of argument which you refer to throughout, and it needs to be a really strong view. Okay, so we might say something like Shakespeare intentionally, see my handwriting isn't great there, sorry, how ironic, uses the supernatural as a warning of the consequences of relentless ambition. Something like that. It's not perfect, but it will do. Consequences, I don't think I've got room for relentless, just about. Okay, so I've got my keyword there, because my keyword is supernatural. Where is it? There it is. And my line of argument is the consequences of relentless ambition. So that's what I'm going to be writing about. Okay? So that's just to go through what these different introductions look like. Very similar for a Christmas Carol. So let's say for a Christmas Carol we get a question on loneliness. Okay? So we might have something like, and again this is that 4/5. Sorry, I was going to do this in blue pen, wasn't I? So for more 4/5, I might say something like Dickens, was it going to do loneliness? No, there's not really death. Something dark, because we could have a dark topic come up. We had kindness last year, so just a prediction, but probably false as they usually are. So Dickens presents death as a consequence, or as a result of Scrooge, as a result if Scrooge doesn't change. Or we'll put refuses to change, because we'll try and be a bit fancier. That's another thing. Try and make yourself sound fancy. Try and make yourself sound like you've got excellent vocabulary, even if you don't, but I'm sure you do. So we've got keyword death, and then we've got refuses to change. All right. Now, if we are looking at 6+, we need a bit more of a line of argument, which I've talked about in the last one. So we might have something like Dickens purposefully uses death to reflect the consequences of excessive greed in society. And then we might want to make it longer and add a bit of AO3 in there, which is fine as well. So we might say to threaten Victorian readers about, and again this is quite a strong one, threaten, so you're thinking about a really strong line of argument there. Victorian readers about the consequences of capitalism. I've used consequences twice, I might want to use something else. Let's change it. Inevitable effects of capitalism. Okay, so a bit of a longer intro there, just to show that it's not one size fits all. So I've got my word, death, and then I've got my bit about excessive greed, and then I've got a bit down here about capitalism. Alright, so that's how I might want to do my introduction. Now, moving on to some sort of common mistakes and just things to make sure that we're doing. I would say common mistakes are using really long quotes or trying to remember really long quotes. So if you stick to the kind of, as a rule, 5-word quotes, and then you're going to zoom in on like a word or a phrase there, that would be really helpful for you. Just remembering to move through the text. So I know we talk about this a lot, words like contrast, motif, if you know what it is. If you don't know what something means, you don't feel confident with it, do not use it. Don't attempt to explain something that you're not confident with. And then remembering the form. Macbeth is a play. It has an audience. And for those of us going for 6+, we should be talking about the stage. We should be talking about stagecrafts. We should be talking about things like props if necessary, stage directions, okay? And then we've got a novella, which has a reader, and it is a book, okay? So we should be referring to things like that, okay? If you're using context, so we know for Macbeth we've got this Jacobean audience, and we know for A Christmas Carol we've got a Victorian audience, Victorian reader rather, then you should be referring to them, but you're not referring to them if it doesn't link to the question. So if you've got a question on the supernatural, you don't need to tell me about women in society. Okay, that's not going to link. If you've got a question about death, it's not necessarily going to link to class. It might link to class with death, but it has to link to the question, okay? So if you can make accurate links, then make them. But if you can't, then just stick with the question. Alright? Really good luck for your exam on Monday. If you do have any questions, obviously feel free to ask your teachers or email, but hopefully that's enough knowledge for you, and you've got enough knowledge, and just be really confident in what you're writing. Again, the exam board wants you to succeed, we want you to succeed, you want to succeed, so just make sure everything you're writing is clear, read through what you're writing, and I'm sure you'll be really successful on literature paper 1. Good luck.